If you can have a job and a place to live, and you've done one thing, one creative thing, even if it's like you've put together a reading of a play in your living room, like whatever it is, that in your first year out is success.
John Kurzynowski is a formerly Brooklyn-based, currently London-based experimental theatre maker, facilitator and lecturer. He is the artistic director of Not Quite Theatre Company, a new London-based laboratory for experimental theatre and performance. He previously served as the founding artistic director of Theatre Reconstruction Ensemble, a New York-based experimental theatre company. He has collaborated with award-winning artists Jaclyn Backhaus, David Greenspan, Joshua William Gelb, and internationally renowned companies Target Margin Theatre, The Talking Band, and Tempting Failure, amongst others. As a lecturer, he has taught at Italia Conti, the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, and Brunel University London. John Kurzynowski, welcome back to the Actors Actuality podcast. How are you?
I'm swell. How are you?
Good. Samuel, how are you?
Very good, thanks. Yeah.
People who are wondering why I just said back, we actually recorded this episode with John last week, and Samuel and I, rather embarrassingly, well, the audio corrupted, technically wasn't our fault, but rather embarrassingly, we've had to get John back on. So I want to say a public apology to John.
Oh.
And a public thank you to John for coming
No,
back.
at all. Yeah, I'm going to do my best to try to say what I said last time, but I probably won't. I'll fail at that, so we'll see what happens. We'll see
what happens.
Go with the flow.
So let's start with you. You've referenced to us that you're a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary artist. Could you explain to us what that means, please?
Yeah, so so for a long time, I sort of saw myself as a multidisciplinary artist, especially when I first started out, because I trained as an actor and then pretty quickly realized, like right near the end of graduation, that I was into directing and devising and theater making. So then I started doing that for a while, but I was doing both at the same time. And then I also fell into producing a bit. So I was doing all these different things, and it felt like I was removed, like wearing one hat at a time. Like I'd be an actor for a bit and then do a project and then take that off and go be a director. At a certain point, and to me, like that's multidisciplinary. It's you have different disciplines and you can do them all, but they're not necessarily happening at once. And at a certain point, I started to realize that I didn't shift all that much from different discipline to discipline or different project to project. That when I was acting, I was still sort of thinking the same way I was as a director or theater maker. And then when I was producing, it sort of all like blended together. And for me, that's sort of where something like interdisciplinarity starts to come in, where it's not about the differences or the different disciplines happening separately, but actually about letting them all happen at once, seeing like what it is that you are at the center of. So there's a practice there, or I don't know, a sort of set of values or something that's present in anything I do, and it just sort of shifts then the exact tasks or actions I'm carrying out, but that those disciplines exist together, that they're always living. It's like all the hats are on at once. So yeah, that's sort of where I see myself more now as an artist and as a maker. Even, when I'm in a room making a show, it's still sort of the same as when I'm in a room teaching people, or when I'm in a room leading a workshop. They all sort of, I'm the same artist with the same set of values, with the same practice, and all those things sort of blend together and become one thing. So yeah, I think that's how I break it down.
Yeah, that makes sense. So rather than identifying as one like craft, it's like all these crafts come together and you're channeling those all the time in everything you do. And like
yeah, and they're the boundaries between them aren't clear. That I'm actively sort of everything at once, rather than thinking about it in a way of like, oh, okay, today I have to take off all those other hats and just wear my acting hat. That just became something that was sort of difficult for me, or just wasn't how I actually think or work as an artist.
Cool.
I think in such a saturated industry as well, it's so good to have so many disciplines available to you. That's something I would say, like in my training, I've really enjoyed that we've done acting, writing and directing all in an acting course.
Yeah, yeah. That you and it's strange because um, in especially in training, like in drama training, at least the way that very much the way it was when I was training forever ago. You do all these different disciplines. Like you'd have your voice class in the morning, and then you have your movement class afterwards, and then you have your acting. Like everything got very separated out, and then you would take like a self-scripting class. It's everything was so separate. Um, and I think in the beginning you probably need that, right? But the more that you keep doing whatever practice you're doing, I think the more you start to see how all those things actually blend and bleed together, that they're not actually separate things. That's something that I've certainly noticed over time that, oh yeah, the things that I do for my voice are sometimes no different than the thing I'll do with my body. And there's a lot of research being done into this. So someone, a former mentor of mine, Experience Brian, her name is Experience Brian, first name is Experience. She has a couple books on this, on interdisciplinarity and the way that for her, if you approach actor training, you can approach it like voice, movement, acting all from the same place, that she sees it as like the starting of a breath and it's all one practice, rather than trying to separate it all out, that you can be sort of this interdisciplinary actor, even from training. Like there is this sort of movement of that now, like of trying to bring all these disciplines together and sort of see what happens when you don't separate them from the beginning and you allow them to be one thing, and that they're always like informing one another. So yeah, it's a really interesting way to start thinking about things. But I've noticed the further away I get from my own training, it's like, oh, I might not even remember where I learned a certain skill. Was it like a voice class, or was it a movement class? Was it an act? Like they all blend at some point and inform one another.
Cool. You touched on your training there. What key aspects of your training do you still use today as a director and theatre practitioner, both from NYU and Stella Adler? What do you think you still draw from those experiences?
Yeah. So I think I tried to explain this last time. So I went to New York University, which is a very interesting school in that it is like sort of half conservatory training and half liberal arts training. So for 3 days a week, you're in like conservatory acting training, and then 2 days a week you're taking like science class or whatever you have to take to get your degree. And because it's a massive school, they have for the conservatory training different studios, some of which are like NYU created, but most of them are like partnerships with established acting studios in New York City. One of them being Stella Adler, one of them being like the Lee Strasberg Institute, one of them being the Meisner Institute. Like so they're sending their students to these places that have like very established ways of teaching acting. And you are essentially, when you audition, you fill out your application, you say what you're interested in, and then you do your monologues or whatever, and then like a sorting hat, they tell you if you get in, like you're going to be sent to the Stella Adler studios. So like you're sort of like sent to where they think maybe you would fit best. And it's 4-year training, because most undergrad training is 4 years in the States. So for the first 2 years, you have to stay in that studio. Like you're committed to where they sent you, and then 2 years in, you can like transfer, switch different one if they have that available option for you. So for the first 2 years, I was at the Stella Adler Studio of Acting, which was wonderful, but very quickly I realized that it was not really a fit for the way that I think or the way that I practice. So, we're doing all this very realistic, naturalistic imagination work, and I would just sit there and I didn't really understand what people were talking about. So I would just do my own thing and then act in scenes and be told I'm doing great. So like, it's this very strange time. So I had a really weird experience with like more formal actor training in that sense. However, the thing that I took most from it that like still really carries with me from that first part of my training was it's incredibly rigorous when it comes to things like voice and speech, when it comes to sort of classics like Shakespeare. So all that like really technical part of the training really stuck with me. and has carried forward. So even when I'm teaching, a lot of the voice and speech techniques and the sort of trajectory of it that I learned at Adler is still sort of how I teach voice when I'm teaching acting. Certainly how I think about Shakespeare, how I teach, how I've performed Shakespeare and directed Shakespeare, it's informed by that. And then halfway through, I transferred to a program called the Experimental Theater Wing, which is sort of the opposite of more traditional training, which they do sort of more Grotowski-based actor training, but then also you take postmodern choreography and self-scripting and Aikido, or like you can just sort of like you're taking a lot of different types of classes that are opening you up in a different kind of way. So that sort of exposed me to a whole different set of skills, and certainly things that a lot of that training I've brought with me, especially when I'm teaching acting. I use a lot of the Grotowski-based work from that program. I had a great choreography teacher named Annie B. Parson, who she's a very famous sort of postmodern choreographer who works with people like David Byrne, and she sometimes does Broadway and stuff at the West End. But she, when she's teaching choreography, sort of encourages you to leave a lot of it to chance. So like roll a die and like whatever the number is, that's how many movements you have that you can use. Like if it's 7, like you can do 7 if you have like 2 dice or whatever. So that sort of idea of chance being a part of making and of doing things, that has, I think, really stuck with me. That's something very early on, like, oh, I don't need to have it all figured out from the onset. Like I don't need to approach this performance from a place of like perfection from the beginning. I can sort of just see where it goes and let outside factors determine what I'm going to do. So yeah, I think that's really stuck with me. And then I think the Grotowski work also, there's a lot in that that's not about, it's not about sort of approaching a performance from a more psychological or it's still psychological, that's not the right way to say it probably, but from a more inner life character driven place. It's not the type of work where you necessarily sit down and think through the backstory of a character right away and start it's more about actually using the people in the room with you or the room itself, the space you're in, like sort of external factors to inform your inner life. So I think that's also something that's really stuck with me, that you don't need to have it all figured out on a more language-based intellectual level. Like you don't have words to what something is and have it thought out that way, that you can use sort of experience or instinct or impulse from your environment to inform how you're going to do something, the choices that you're going to make around something, which I think goes with that idea of chance again, or of not having it all figured out and sort of finding it in ways that take you out of your head a bit, maybe. I feel like that's a very long-winded way of describing it.
No, that made sense. I was going to ask, does that take the pressure off creating a character and a story and a process when you're using those sort of methods, or is it just a different angle of looking at it?
No, it can. So I think it depends on the type of actor you are, right? So again, like for me, I realized very quickly, like, oh, I'm not made for the Stella Adler sort of method of acting where you use your imagination to create a whole backstory and do that, like all that kind of work. It's like, that doesn't really work for me. But there are also times, I've done a little bit of Strasberg training, and Strasberg's all like sense memory for something that's happened to you, like using your actual life to like place those memories, or like, if something traumatic has happened to you and you're doing a traumatic scene, you might not think through it necessarily, but you like if there's a smell you associate, you like try to remember that smell, and that will activate. It's like, so there are times where things like that just like I don't follow that method, particularly what, like, it's not something that works for me, but sometimes something just lines up where it's like, oh yeah, this is so close to something that happened to my real life. I might as well use that skill or that like method like to help with that. So I think Grotowski is sort of similar in that way. Like it's not always going to work. Sometimes you do need to have, depends on what you're doing. Like if you're doing a very realistic, naturalistic play, you'll probably need to do all that like deeper homework. But also sometimes you don't have all the information in a script, and sometimes it's not really, you might not need to have all the information. You just need to have what's actually like in the room with you, what's in the space, what the actors are giving you, and then you can use all that to fill it in a different kind of way. And if you've encountered that, yeah. But there's some plays where like the playwright has given you everything, like you know everything because it's truly all there. Eugene O'Neill is a great example where he has like notoriously has like 8 pages of stage direction that describe every character in like the most intense detail, where like you just know everything about them. But then sometimes they give you nothing, and all you have are the words on a page. Sometimes there's no stage direct, like you have nothing. So sometimes it's, if you are given that, having a method or an approach that doesn't rely on all of that information can be really helpful. So I think that's how it's worked for me at times.
Cool, thank you.
I think John's answered that question.
Yeah, I would agree actually, yeah. So going on to sort of creating work, which I think is something we're quite interested to talk about, just because like young actors coming into the industry, what are the first steps, both business-wise potentially and or creatively, for making your own work when you're kind of fresh into this world of
my advice is always to start making something, before you get to like the businessy end of things. Before you decide like you're going to make a theater company, or you're going to, I don't know, before you take those next steps where you like make it the business of making something, it's important to establish the practice that you have, that's uniquely yours, right? So I always encourage people, if you've got a hunch that you want to, this might be something, like you might be interested in making theater, you might be interested in not just acting or performing, but like actually creating, maybe self-scripting or devising, whatever it is, check it out. Find a cheap space, or just get in someone's living room and like get some friends together and try some things, like test the waters a bit and try to develop something. Because if you can then slowly develop a way of doing something, that then makes it so much easier to create sort of the business around it, right? If you know what it is that you do and how you make something, what's unique about the way that you make something, and what's unique about the product that then emerges out of that, you then can create a business that supports that. So either a company model or structure that like supports that work, or like choose different sort of paths forward that support that. Like whether it's like, okay, I'm going to try being a director now, and you'll know, like you'll have a clearer sense of what kind of director you are and what kind of work you're doing and how to sell that in a certain way. I think it can be a real a trap that people can fall in, especially early on, is that they just want to jump ahead to like having it all figured out, or having it all like this idea of like of success on this grand scale of like of wanting to jump ahead to that, when it's really, there's no need to rush that. You have time essentially to build up something and to discover something, to figure it out, because then once you have that, you have so much more foundational like structure to make it some sort of business out of that. Yeah, I think that's how I would approach that.
What are the key things that graduating actors should focus on in their first year out?
Ooh, what a good question. To be honest, this is every time I am teaching students, acting students who are in their final year, my advice is always, your first year out, make sure you have a job, just a job that pays you money, that you can live off of. Have a home, whatever that is, like whether you've moved back home or you've moved in with flatmates, like find a place, and then strive to do one creative project. If you can get that, if you can have a job and a place to live, and you've done one creative thing, even if it's like you've put together a reading of a play in your living room, like whatever it is, that in your first year out is success. There are people who might do much more than that. Like it's going to be very different for everyone, right? But I think we get really bogged down in that first year out of like needing to like hit the ground running. Like it's all going to get figured out. Like I've got to land that big TV spot, or I've got to like land this next gig. And while that's great to have that sort of ambitious goal, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's success. That sort of in that first year out, you're also still figuring out how to live outside of school. I think a lot of people forget that like up until this point, most people haven't had to not follow the schedule that is school. Like gives you sort of the structure. You're trying to figure out you're suddenly sort of thrust into the world in a very different kind of way. So that alone will take up time and need sort of space. So yeah, I think removing that pressure off of yourself in that first year out is key. And then if things do happen, great, they did. Like if you do something, get cast in a bunch of things, it's great. That's awesome. But also if you do one thing, that's huge. That's if you've done one project, but you also are making money and have a space, like a place to live, great. That's also hugely successful. So that's my best advice for first.
I think that's really poignant. I think it's so easy to get lost in like the glitz and glamour when you're in third year and see like the bright lights.
Yeah.
But like you said, one creative thing, anything else is a bonus.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. And also like just because you're not actively, if you don't get cast in things right away and you're not acting every day the way that you are in school, it doesn't mean you're not an actor anymore. I think that's also the thing that people forget. That's another big part of that transition, right? Like if you're doing it every day for years, suddenly when you're not doing it every day, it feels like you start to question like, oh, am I an actor now? Like, who am I? Like, and that's, yeah, getting yourself sort of used to that, but also reminding yourself that just because you're not doing it constantly, it doesn't mean you aren't anymore. Finding ways to keep yourself, like, I always like keep taking classes. Don't think that training is done. Like find a class that excites you and maybe take that for a bit, or like practice, do your vocal warm-ups, practice your diction, like things like that you can do in your own home. Like do little things that keep you connected and going. But also, yeah, like it's that pressure isn't going to help. I think the pressure of expecting so much isn't going to help you, because it could happen, but it could not. And neither of those outcomes is bad necessarily. I think that's the other thing. People will put a lot of pressure on ourselves to like what's good and bad. So like what success is seen very much in that way, right? There's like you have to like achieve something to be good at it, when really that's not the way it works. I might have said this last time. We had at Stella Adler, it was very like old school drama training. And there was this one old teacher that I had who was just, he could be so horrible. We all loved him, but he would shout at you like obscenities and like throw like his shoe at people, like, like that kind of like crazy old school acting training. And he has an 18-year-old, after my first scene I did for him, he told me, John, you're good. And someday you'll be great when you're 50. When you're 50, you'll be like, you'll play all the big parts, you'll be great. And until then, it's going to be lawyers on television. Just lots of lawyers on television, if you're lucky. And it was such like as an 18-year-old just starting at drama, like a drama school, it's like, okay, like, so that sort of idea of like, there's this pressure to be something is so strange. And then there's also that where it's like, yeah, I guess there was a version of my life where like I would become very successful at 50, and until then I would barely act. And that could be true. Like that's actually like thinking back on it, I'm like, yeah, that actually would make sense with the way that my acting career is not turned out. It's like I could be that, right? I could at 50 become this like famous actor. Who knows? But like success comes at different times. That's basically say that. Like you don't put the pressure on yourself to, I don't know, to achieve everything in that first year out, because who knows what's going to happen.
Wow, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
You recently launched Not Quite Theatre Company. Could you tell us a little bit about that and the vision behind it?
Yeah. So yeah, I had in New York, I ran a theater company for nearly a decade. That was an experimental company that devised sort of what here we would call post-dramatic work. And I, when I came to the UK, I came to study to get a master's degree at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, and it was sort of a transition away for a bit from making work or having a company. And over the years since then, I have looked around and realized that the kind of work that I was making in New York, which very much sort of fit into a tradition that's there, and I was one of many theater makers doing at least not the same thing, but doing work that sort of is in a similar world, that kind of work doesn't exist here as much. It's not as present. It's not something that I've seen a lot of. So I've had this sort of desire over the past couple of years to try to see what happens if I start making this kind of work in this kind of environment with artists here who aren't as familiar with it, where it's a process maybe and a practice that's not something that they've seen or experienced as readily as the artists I've worked with in the past. So I started about a little over a year ago, I had a hunch for a thing I wanted to make. So I put people in a room together and just started to see what would happen if we started making something around it. And as it sort of worked a bit, like as it started to like sort of feel right, that people were responding to it and engaging with it. Like I said earlier, that started to make a practice, and we realized that this maybe should become something that we make a business out of, or like a structure around. So now we've created a company around it. And here, the sort of thing that I kept realizing in conversations around it was that people really do question if what this is theater. It doesn't sort of fit the sort of traditional maybe structure of drama, of classic drama, like with narrative and all those things that we think of as theater. So that it quickly became obvious that it was not quite theater the way that people here maybe think about it, but we're trying to sort of make a space for it to exist as theater, as something that can be as part of the fringe theater scene here, and sort of see what happens then with it. So yeah, we've been working on a project that will be premiering as a work in progress showing in the autumn. So yeah, we're very excited to see where that goes and just see what happens.
You say on your website that you do a lot of R&Ds.
Yeah.
What does that sort of process entail?
Yeah, so when I start a project, I honestly have no idea what it's going to be. I really do start from a place of like not knowing. So I have a hunch, like I said, like I'll have a question or like I don't know, like a problematic of some sort, like, oh, what would happen if these two things go together? Or what happens if you explore this way? And then I get some people in a room together who I think might be interesting to work with, especially around this topic maybe, or around this idea. And then in the beginning especially, I just throw tasks at them to see what we start to make around it. So we don't talk much. So I don't know if the project had something to do with like with morals or like good and evil or something, the first thing I would do is ask everyone to make statues with their bodies, like human statues. Make two of them. You have 2 minutes to make 2 statues, and the first one is good, is labeled good, and the first one will be labeled evil. Go. And then like they do that, and then we look at it, and then as we show things, we all observe what we saw. So we just start talking about the things that we're seeing in the room, not so much what we think about it, not like not putting judgment on it, not saying like if it's good or bad, just saying like we're seeing these things. And then around that, we start making all of this sort of strange work that might be physical, might eventually like be small scenes that we're writing or creating. And then talking about it, like pointing out what we've noticed. And in that process, without having any point where we sit down and do like traditional table work or we're discussing ideas, I start to see what this group of people collectively, what we think about this particular topic, because they're making work and making observations around that show me where this project goes, like what they think about this idea or what they generate out of it. So we do that quite a lot, that we keep returning to the same idea and then building up all this material. Some of it sticks, and like if we're throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall, like some of it sticks, a lot of it just like falls right down. We like, like it helped us learn what doesn't work maybe, or what's not interesting, but okay. And then over time, what's sticking like starts to become a piece of theater that I then start to shape and make. So then the workshops that the R&D develops over time, beginning, it's very much like we have no idea. We're just seeing what it is. And then as the artists start making more, we start to see more. I start to see more about like what it is that's being shaped, what is being made, and then like a project forms that way. And then we just keep on like building on that. But I do quite a lot, like the longest process I've had creating a show was like 2.5 years, 3 years of just like, continuous every few months getting together, trying something out, doing some work in progress shows like along the way, just like building something slowly to see what actually emerges out of it. So yeah, it's very much a playful environment where people have to be really comfortable with not knowing what we're doing or what we're making, and just sort of game to see where it goes. So yeah, it's very different that way.
So it really depends on who the actors are you've got in the room then, because it comes from what they play with when you...
Totally. Even like the project that we're making now, going into it, there's always like some idea of where it could go. You have like, I have like, oh, it's probably going to go here. But then if you get people in a room together, you never know what's one thing that someone makes or stumbles upon suddenly sparks something in other people and activates something that then changes the trajectory. Like the show that we're making would have never really thought that it would have turned into what it's turning into if not for the actual people who've been in that room, because they started to come up with things or make things that were just so different than if it was a different group of people, or if I was alone trying to write it as a play or something. Like I would have never come up with the things that we've made. And then that interaction of people, the way that they then build something together, because it's a unique sort of chemistry, right? Like that chemistry of people is so unique that it creates something that couldn't be created if it was anyone else. So yeah, it gets tricky then though, because then you're reliant then on the same people to keep being able to commit, which as we know is very difficult because people have other things that go on in their lives or get cast in bigger things. So it is this tricky world where you build up a thing around people and then you sort of see who's left at the end to do the thing.
Cool, thank you.
Good to ask the
Yeah, good.
We've got our sort of final question that we're trying to make like a staple of our podcast.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Here it goes. If you could say one sentence to a young actor entering the industry as a piece of advice, what would that be?
I would say to find comfort in failure. That it's we were sort of talking about this a little bit earlier of like striving for perfection, but like you can't start from a place of like needing to get it right all the time or needing to like be perfect. Like failing can be very good. You can learn a lot from failure. So get really comfortable with it, because some of the best things that will happen are because something fails. Remove that pressure of need to get it right, because failing is very good. And then as artists, we're all going to fail a lot. Like, that just happens. We fail a lot. So get really comfortable with that. Like, embrace it. See it as like a positive thing. Like,
amazing. John Kurzynowski, thank you very much for coming on the Actors Actuality podcast again.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, John.
Thanks so much.